Hello and welcome to Tech Clarified, where we talk all things technology. If you are joining me for the first time, my name is Theo and I'm sure glad you are here. This happens to be my very first content video on YouTube, so I would love for you to stay right through to the end and please leave me some comments so I know how to improve and what other topics I might be able to cover. Today, we're going to cover the subject of virtualization, which is something that you may not be aware of, but you are probably already using. If you are using any of the cloud services, chances are the services are being hosted on virtual hardware somewhere in the cloud. Let's take a look at a few scenarios where virtualization is being used. As I say, most of the big vendors such as Amazon, Microsoft, and Google are using some form of virtualization in their data centers in the cloud. But more closer to home, chances are you could be using this for a number of scenarios which I'm about to describe. As an example, myself, I used to be a technical solution consultant for many years, and what I would do is I'd turn up at customers with a laptop that was configured with virtualization. On this laptop would be a scenario or a proof of concept solution that I would demo to the customer to demonstrate that we understood their problem and we had a solution that would meet their needs. Another scenario where virtualization might be useful for you is if you are trying to learn a new technology. Say for instance you want to dabble in Linux. You might configure your computer for virtualization and then you play around with Linux, and once you're done, you can remove the configuration without having to mess around with dual booting. Yet another scenario is, suppose you're studying for your Microsoft certification exams and perhaps you want to learn how to install Windows 2019 and how to configure administration. In that case, again, you can configure virtualization and set up a network with servers and client machines, and you configure them and then you get the practice that you need. So as you can see, there are quite a number of scenarios where virtualization comes in handy. I would like to make the point that virtualization is vendor agnostic. What this means is that there are quite a number of vendors out there such as Citrix, Oracle, Microsoft, VMware, who are all offering one form or another of virtualization. You will hear me on this particular video talk about Microsoft Hyper-V and Windows, but please don't take that to mean that only Microsoft provides this type of solution. There are quite a number of vendors out there. The only reason I'm covering Microsoft is because I'm going to follow up this video with a number of other videos where we go into more detail on Hyper-V on the Windows 10 platform, and I sure hope you'll be able to join me on those videos. So, before we jump in, there's just one other aspect I want to cover, which is that virtualization broadly comes in two categories. There's what I tend to consider as the consumer grade type of virtualization, and here I'm talking about products such as VMware Workstation and VirtualBox. These products are mainly for the desktop platform, and they're most useful if you're just trying things out, as I described earlier on. You also then have what I would call the commercial grade solutions such as from VMware as well as Microsoft Hyper-V. Microsoft Hyper-V is a bit of an unusual one in that the same technology that you might find in their data centers is now been made available to the desktop since Windows 8.1. I'll be covering the configuration of Hyper-V on Windows 10 in subsequent videos, and I look forward to you joining me on those. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive right in and see what virtualization is all about. Imagine you have a physical computer that is running Windows 10. This machine can also be referred to as the host. That computer will have a processor with a number of cores, perhaps 8, 12, or 16. It will also have some memory, perhaps 8 GB of RAM. Lastly, it will have some sort of storage like a 1 TB hard drive. Let us now imagine that after booting up your computer, it is using half of the available system memory for the Windows operating system and any other applications currently running. Let's assume only some of the processor cores are being utilized as well as a small proportion of the physical storage on the hard drive. What all this means is you have a spare capacity in terms of memory, processor, and hard drive resources. Now, imagine you have a magic wand that you could wave, and as a result, a make pretend computer gets created in the physical computer. We shall call this machine a virtual machine, or VM for short. It can also be referred to as a guest machine. The virtual machine is allocated a bit of memory, processing power, and storage left over from the unutilized portion on the host machine. You can continue waving your wand and creating more virtual machines, so long as you still have some spare capacity on the physical machine. The purpose of virtualization software like Hyper-V is to manage the creation of the virtual machines and the sharing of resources across the physical and virtual machines. Furthermore, the virtualization software isolates each VM so that if it crashes or freezes up, it does not affect the other VMs or the host machine. This is done so well that each VM mimics a real computer to the extent that you can install operating system and application software on it just as you would on a physical machine. The VMs can even be configured to connect to each other as part of a network or be accessed from the outside world to provide services like web hosting. Of course, this is a highly simplified explanation of virtualization because the host machine also provides other resources like graphics processing power and network connectivity, among others. There's a lot of complex scheduling, multitasking, and dynamic allocation and recovery of computational resources across the host and guest machines. That, my friends, is the principle of virtualization. It comes down to maximizing utilization of the resources on the host machine. So, there you have it. It's not very difficult, is it? I do have to admit that was just a bit of a light touch on the subject. In reality, it's far more complex than this, and we haven't even gone into the theory of hypervisors or any of the low-level detail. That was very intentional. This was just to cover the concept so that you've got a basic understanding of what virtualization is all about. And of course, you can always go and read up more about it if you're interested in the technical background to it. Based on what we've discussed here today, you can begin to understand why virtualization is so important. Imagine having VMs that can be switched on and brought up online in a matter of seconds, depending on the hardware you've got. So if you've got a hardware that's running on powerful servers with the fast storage subsystems, with a lot of memory and a lot of processing power, you can bring VMs online very quickly, and they can be configured in a number of different configurations that offer redundancy and for high availability. They can be configured for high availability, so your applications will never experience downtime. At the same time, there are concepts that are also associated with virtualization, such as elasticity, where more machines can be brought online as they are needed, and then they can be powered down when they are no longer needed. So we have barely scratched the surface on the subject here, but I do hope that you have learned something here today. So just to wrap this up, let's just make the point that virtualization is available to you if you're running Windows 10, and I look forward to you joining me on the coming up videos where I show you how to do that. And also just bear in mind that it's being used everywhere in the cloud, and it underpins most of the cloud infrastructure. I do hope you have learned something new today. And if you have, I hope you will subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you know when I put out a new video. In the meantime, I look forward to seeing you, and please share this with your friends.